Good morning. A slight change to the sub-headline there. What I want to talk to you today, I suppose, is how we should think about integrating the wonderful value proposition of TV alongside with that developing digital stack. And also how that's being powered by a subtle but profound change in the way that we on the buy side are thinking about communications planning, and why that subtle idea is being powered by the rise of programmatic media technologies. If we take a look at kind of the marketplace as we see it, as it stands today, I like to liken it to the riffle shuffle. We have two decks of cards. There is a digital deck of cards and a TV deck of cards. They are being shuffled together. As Owen Gottlieb said yesterday, that convergence is no longer spoken about in the future tense or even in the present tense. It's primarily in the past tense. The vast majority of our consumers have already shuffled. They're watching OTT on their TVs. They are watching players on their devices. The two worlds are completely mixed in together. But a little bit like this strange GIF, certain parts of the ad tech industry remain resolutely at the top, unshuffled, whilst all the cards beneath them start to kind of become fully integrated. And ultimately, I think there's a far bigger upside to integrating those two worlds than there is a potential short-term downside. Now, what we do know is that the digital technologies, the technology stacks that are out there have matured and scaled. I'm not going to bore you to death with all the different terms on the slide. You've seen that many times. But what we do know, despite all the issues that do exist within some degrees of digital media, is that these things have scaled to a huge degree. They are delivering billions of dollars of revenue each year. They are serving billions of messages every hour and trillions of data points. A lot of complicated moving parts are now working together pretty well, and they're delivering significant performance results for many clients. They don't do the job that TV does. They do a whole bunch of different jobs. They are more optimized further down the purchase funnel, but they are doing a very effective job. And it means that Strategy Analytics says that their digital should be doubling almost over the next kind of 5 years or so. Globally, $160 billion roughly last year, around $300 billion by 2020. Overall, it's taking over 100% of the net growth in advertising worldwide. That's not necessarily taking away from TV. The more legacy channels of print and out-of-home are suffering more significantly, but it's still being powered, and primarily being powered by the ability to say the right thing to the right person at the right time. And also, it's powering a huge, in its own right, marketing data marketplace worldwide, approaching $50 billion now. And all of this, these different technology stacks are very much working alongside those different walled gardens. The walled gardens do have incredibly rich data assets. They have also scaled over the last 10 to 15 years, so that they are generally speaking to audiences in the billions. And really, their secret has been the horizontal integration. On the buy side, we have the vertical integration, but this kind of horizontal integration, from our perspective, of the identity layer, an operating system, marketplace activation, either content themselves or content partnerships to get the inventory, and also integration with a wide variety of devices, have provided a really powerful proposition for advertisers. We on the agency side like to think of ourselves as honeybees that fly between the walled gardens and try to pollinate between the data. Through the use of DMPs, through the use of identity matches, through the use of a whole range of probabilistic technologies, we can start to generate ideas and insights that work across those different audiences. And it's across those different audiences that we start to see huge amounts of value. So we can start to see how an action in a search area might lead to a different kind of message in a display environment later that day. So we can very much more tailor a message to the individual user's specific requirements, either based on their audience niche or where they are in the purchase journey. And of course, TV has all of these different constituent parts. What we've seen over the last couple of days has been presentations from all sorts of TV platforms and technology brands describing the constituent parts of that same value chain. And TV has an awful lot more that the digital world doesn't necessarily have. So it's through connecting those parts together and working across those different walled gardens and working in partnership with us on the buy side, we can start to leverage those unique qualities of TV that we all know and love. And also just to connect those things to a far wider set of data points. So what is increasingly common now, and an increasingly common perspective when we speak to our clients is how we think about audiences in this subtler way, how we start to define audiences in a more active, dynamic way. So we don't think about our audience as a fixed buying audience. We don't necessarily think about our audience as being 16-34-year-old males, or ABC1 adults, or housewives with kids. In that world, an audience is quite a static thing, and you think of your audience as a single entity, and you then start to plan channels around that audience. When you start thinking about audiences as a more dynamic entity that can be defined by first-party customer data and whether the demand opportunity may be there, or maybe through retailer activations, or whether it be people who are in a certain town when it's sunny, or people who do certain kinds of behaviours, we start to think of audiences as a far more active, dynamic piece. And then it's a channel's ability to speak to that particular audience in that particular time frame is how we judge the value of it, and also the impact to change behaviours. And all of these things are now really starting to become not just some kind of future-facing concept, but very much something that we are doing day to day, changing those ideas about how we're thinking about audiences. So increasingly, we don't think of an audience as a number of people, as a group of people, and trying to maximize the size of an audience. We think about an audience as a demand opportunity, how much stuff we can sell to that particular group of people for a particular reason. Again and again, when we look at the numbers, because we've got the data to be able to do these things, because we've got the first-party data from those clients, we can identify there are interesting niches who are generating a significant proportion of profitability, or have a significant proportion of the potential market growth. There's all sorts of interesting niches that are out there. Not to say that we don't need to be speaking to those mass audiences, but very much there are also audiences on the side of those mass audiences that can start to generate that powerful incremental growth. And so, what we start to need from the TV world is more census-level reporting. Not to say that we don't need panel reporting. We definitely need that in terms of the execution. I think we'll start to see, in the longer term, we'll start to identify households deterministically through the census-level data, and identify individuals probabilistically. And we'll do our optimizations based around those things. But also, increasingly, and we've seen stories over the last couple of days about that, the use of custom match technologies. So I can understand how many of my current customers I've reached with a particular campaign, where my lapsed customers, where they're viewing TV, what differentiates different kinds of customers from each other. And it's very important that we start to think about how we define and describe our various different audiences. Secondly, also, it's how we start to scale those audiences across different platforms. The fact is that all these different platforms out there, whether they be in the TV world, or out of home, or cinema, radio, in the digital space, they're all defined slightly differently. And that's part of our role on the agency side, is to develop proxies for those audiences in that very dynamic sense, not just proxies of 16-34-year-olds, but proxies of today's current high-value customers. And therefore, we need to think about dynamic and pre-packaged audiences at the same time, and have a far more fluid approach to those things. And then thirdly, cross-device, cross-media delivery and measurement. And what's really, really important here, I think, is to understand the power of metrics, that we need to think a little bit less about just focusing on the media metrics. They're vitally important, but we do also need to think, what is the impact of that particular metric? That impact on short-term sales, but also on the longer-term measures of brand equity and saliency. What we have with this vast amount of data that's available to us, and then we have proxies through searches and through social activity, as well as the sales data. We need to be a lot smarter about defining our metrics in a very, very particular way. I think what we'll start to see over the next few years is the ability that we're able to fully understand any given brand's communication strategy purely by understanding their metrics. Once you understand their metrics, you know exactly what they're trying to achieve, who they're trying to speak to, what effect they're trying to leverage, and how they're trying to do it. So for that, what we need is privacy compliant tracking. We're not talking about Big Brother here and be able to do some of the things that maybe we'll feel less comfortable about. The fact is that data will stick within those different walled gardens, but having federated data environments, federated data structures, means that we're able to ask questions of that data. We're able to ask smart questions of that data and get the insights out of it and understand the particular effect of a given channel. And very much, I think that really reflects the power of TV. We've proven these points further down the funnel in the digital space, And there's only so much you can do with that, because it's only a certain number of people are looking to buy that particular product. That power of persuasion to get people to want to buy something they weren't previously aware of. No one is questioning the power of audio-visual content and advertising messages to do that very, very effectively. It's just that we're able to up the effectiveness of that based on these lessons. So what we're able to achieve with that kind of greater level of integration is just a far greater understanding of the detail of consumer behaviour. As I say, it's not about thinking about set overall buying audiences. There will be big audiences, there will be small audiences. We can now start to consider them together. We can start to define or talk about what defines a specific audience and what differentiates them from other audiences, and where we can start to affect those kind of behaviours. And also, our audiences are very dynamic in their own right, so that we can start to react to those new behaviours, whether they be second screening or the use of AR and VR and all those different things. Brands can start to be part of the story of a developing consumer experience. Secondly, optimal campaign delivery. There's all sorts of longer presentations we can do about that, but once we have access to that data, we can start thinking about multiple audiences and optimizing campaigns, doing things like understanding where the hard-to-reach audiences are. We can reach 60% of a given audience pretty easily. The next 40% is very, very tough. Often what we find is that 40% is hiding in the zero-rated spots. And so greater leverage of those zero-rated spots to find those different audiences is a real quick early win. And of course, all this stuff applies not just to addressable media, not just applies to cross-channel, but also, of course, to linear inventory. And finally, of course, closing the loop to sale. We can start to see how we can work towards closing the loop to sale in both the short term and the long term. And as I said previously, we can really start to think about how we leverage the real power of TV to sell products to people, to persuade them to do things in a different kind of way. And that's, I think, is pretty much it from me. Just to say that, yeah, I think I probably hopefully hit some of the bullshit bingo terms from John Block's terms last week. But I think the upside of the opportunity of integrating some of the lessons from the digital world is really, really huge. And I think we should grab that opportunity with both hands. Thank you.
Thanks. Does anyone have any questions for Jean-Paul while we have an opportunity? I can see... Oh, yeah, I can see someone.
Hi, David Phillips from Nlogic in Canada. There's sort of two rough categories of TV ads, which is sort of roughly branding and then doing stuff more, call to action. How do you look to assess those two things differently?
It's very much by the metrics. So I think what we're starting to see is where there weren't any sort of two real camps. Actually, I think part of this story is that we can now measure more sophisticated approaches. There are many subsections of brand advertising. It's maybe how do you utilise, let's say an association with a major sports event, and you can amplify that kind of thing. That would sit in the branding category, but that would be very different to maybe the branding that a CPG brand might be doing in terms of just constant reminder to buy those products. So I think we won't be talking about two types of TV, we'll be talking about hundreds of types of TV. And the fact is that each brand will have a good understanding of the several mechanisms that work really, really, really well for them. So there will be more complexity on one side, but I think also greater clarity for all of us in our individual spaces.
Oh, quick question there.
Hello, John Moulding at VideoNet. What's the first thing you would want a traditional terrestrial broadcaster to do for you that would get you closer to that?
To work with the other players. I think one of the stories also is the fact that no one player can deliver any of this. So it'll be that the fact is that from the terrestrial broadcasters, it's working with the TV platforms to work in terms of some of the data that they're able to generate. It will also be the case of how we can start to measure more effectively across their different platforms. So whether it be the OTT platforms or VOD and those kind of things. I think there are some short-term challenges, and we need to kind of align our interests more. There is this issue of by taking money out of broadcast and putting it in VOD, there may be a perception of a loss there. But if it can be proven to be more effective, then I think what we'll start to see is more advertisers coming in to TV, and also maybe they'll start to do things like use TV to speak to linear to speak to the main audience, and then maybe VOD to speak to some interesting niches, or using the data to optimize their linear to a greater degree. But ultimately, it's to work together, which has been, I think, the message from the last couple of days. But we do need to accelerate that process. We've been speaking to clients over the last few months about this, and that's the message we're getting loud and clear, is that they want us to put our foot down on the accelerator pedal. Cool.
Obviously, I think, again, Jean-Paul's going to be around during the session, so do pigeonhole him over lunch if you want to hear more about that. I'd also had a question about regional variations, but I didn't need to use it.